Everybody here is delighted to see you here.
Well, I'm delighted to see all of you. Thank you for staying and not going to the bathroom.
So this is obviously not your first time here because the movie itself was shot in Northern Ireland.
It was. We shot in Belfast. I lived there for 6 glorious months.
Brilliant. Yeah. And any particular reason you chose Belfast for it? Obviously, it is stunning. The movie is absolutely beautiful to watch.
Yeah, you know, with this movie, we were given basically the budget of a comedy, but we needed the movie to kind of look like it had the budget of Lord of the Rings, which no one was going to give us that much money to just tell dick jokes. So for us, we went and we visited Belfast, and we went to like Tullamore Forest and Giant's Causeway. That just looked like how we had always imagined this movie looking, and we were able to, like, you know, make the movie seem bigger than it really was just from like the landscapes that were there.
So you actively have a hands-on role in how these things are done. I often thought that there's just somebody who goes and does these things, but you came over and visited Ireland and scouted out these places.
Yeah, we scouted Ireland, Scotland, England, and yeah, David Green, the director, is an old friend of mine. We went to film school together. I've known him for a long time, so he lets me probably be in like more decision making than I probably should be allowed to be involved with.
Well, one of the, I know for a fact, one of the big decision-making processes that you were part of was the casting, which is, I think everybody can agree, an absolutely superb cast. How do you go about convincing people to get on board? I imagine, having worked with James Franco before, you have a good relationship there. So how do you do that without making it awkward?
Well, you know, a lot of people don't know who Natalie Portman is, and so we wanted to give her a shot, you know, finally. You know, we had worked with Franco on Pineapple Express and had a great time with him. He's a really good dude. He's a lot of fun to work with, and he's one of those good-looking actors that doesn't take his image too seriously. Like, he's not afraid to like get silly and to make himself look dumb, which is very important if you're going to be involved with this movie. And Natalie actually had approached us. She really wanted to do a comedy, and her and David had been talking about another project, and then this came up, and I knew I had never worked with Natalie before. I didn't know her before this movie, but I knew she had a pretty awesome sense of humor. I'd seen the Saturday Night Live like gangster rap video she had done. I thought it was cool to see someone as prestigious as Natalie kind of getting dirty and doing crazy stuff, and so we thought that would work in this film.
Well, tell me, just out of interest, was she aware of the kiss before she signed up to the movie?
Yeah, originally she was Franco's love interest, and when she signed on, I was like, rewrite, we're changing all of this.
Lovely stuff. I mean, like you mentioned, the budget there, the special effects in the movie are astonishing, not least the whacked out wizard. Did you have a hand in how you design that kind of a scene, or any of the special effects that are involved in it?
Yeah, you know, it was important. You know, this movie was sort of an homage to the films that Dave and I had grown up on, like these sword and sorcery movies of like the early '80s, things like Conan the Barbarian and everything like Clash of the Titans and Kroll, and even things like Dark Crystal. And so David really wanted to kind of make sure that we kind of gave nods to all the different levels of technology that fantasy movies have used. Everything from like the CG hand creature to something like Simon the Bird that kind of was reflective of like the owl from Clash of the Titans, even to like a, you know, a dirty wizard that's a puppet that, yeah. I mean, it was honestly just always a dream of mine to jerk off one of the puppets in Dark Crystal. That's fun.
The character, obviously your character, Thadeous, is he's not your typical character, lead character in one of these movies. I mean, was that the core idea of the funny to it? Because there's obviously a lot of running gags throughout, and one of them is that he's the least heroic man in the world.
Yeah, you know, for us it was like if this were a typical fantasy movie, James Franco's character would be the lead. He's the hero, he has the charm, he has the skills to basically get the job done. And us, the comedy was sort of if we had just built this fantasy world as realistic as, you know, as possible by casting people like Damian Lewis and Toby Jones and Charles Dance and make it feel like it's a legitimate fantasy film, but then just kind of shift the lens of who the movie's actually about and just make it about the good-for-nothing, you know, younger brother who can't do any of those awesome things.
Tell me this, how important was the cursing element of it? Because to me that is one of the funniest parts of it, is the introduction of modern curses like magic motherfucker to the whole piece. It really just elevates it and makes it funny. Was that something that was always there from the beginning, introducing that?
Yeah, it was always there. You know, with all the stuff we do, we really we improv a lot in the films we do. Everything from like Pineapple Express to this TV show Eastbound and Down that we do. We'll do like 1 or 2 takes on what's written, and then from there we'll just like push the material and improv a lot. And so there'd be certain takes where we would, David would tell us, like, all right, just keep this whole thing, period. Don't say anything modern at all. And then if he takes where he would just say, just rip it, say whatever you want to. And then in the editing room, we'll kind of find that balance of where it, works and where it doesn't work. But, we're just dirty. We just like cuss words, and so we just jammed a bunch of them into this movie.
Tell us about that improvising process, because there's obviously certain times in it where it must have been hard to keep a straight face. Does the director throw lines, or is it largely left up to you guys to do what you want to do?
David throws lines. He kind of directs right off camera, so he's constantly throwing things at you. And, sometimes it's not even to improv jokes. He'll just improv, he'll yell something at you, and you'll have a reaction to it, and it'll be that he'll use in the take. But, as far as, like, where the improv goes, for instance, that scene with the Wise Wizard, that originally was just scripted as we just kind of come into this place and get stoned with this weird puppet, and he tells us what we got to do on the quest. And there were like 2 puppeteers working the puppet, and one of the guys is voicing the puppet. And during one of the takes, Franco just starts building in this backstory that he used to come here and take his shirt off and jump in the bed. And the guys that are puppeteering it started playing into it, were like, yeah, don't you tell anyone. And so that whole backstory was just a weird improv that I never thought would ever make it into the movie. But it is.
I mean, when you're pitching a movie of this girth, a massive, huge budget movie, like, it must be hard to convince them that, trust me, we'll improv loads of extra funny shit into it on the day. I mean, the script itself obviously has to be strong going in. Can you talk us through how you get a movie like this off the ground?
That's a good question. I mean, honestly, I think it was the perfect storm. I think David had just come off Pineapple Express, and, like you said, the movie looks like it's made for a ton of money, but we actually had a plan to make it for a much lower budget than how it appeared. So for them, I think because Natalie and James were involved, and David had just had the success of Pineapple, they were really willing to kind of give us a shot. But I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that we were shooting in Belfast, and that was too long of a plane ride for any executives to come over and make sure that we weren't misbehaving.
We're going to go to the audience pretty soon, so you guys be ready with your hands, because we don't think we have a roaming mic, so you're going to have to shout and be ready to go. I understand from what I've read about the movie that you did a lot of the stunts. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm so athletic I can pull all these things off. David wanted me to train. Like, I went to like one day of sword training, and David pulled me out and was like, "No, I want you to be the worst swordsman ever. I want you to look like an idiot. So don't train, don't do anything." And which is cool with me because I'm pretty lazy. I don't like to go do physical things. And there was a lot more horse riding in the movie, and I had never ridden a horse before this movie. I went to one day of horseback riding and was terrified, so I went home that night and wrote all the horses out of the movie. I went and wrote that scene where Fabious just gets rid of the horses.
So yeah. The carriage chase is probably the best chase scene that we've seen in a kind of, you rarely see car chases.
Yeah, you don't really see a lot of carriage chases these days.
Yeah, they've got rid of a lot of those. You did the jump from the carriage to the horses, is that correct?
Yeah, we climbed up. We climbed out of this moving carriage, and yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, we could have been killed.
Okay, well, I guess I was hoping that answer would go on a little bit longer, but
I try to forget that day.
Yeah. So I think it's time to go to the audience. Would anybody have a question for Danny? Lady there in the middle. I know that's a pretty general description of where you're seated, but you know yourself.
Okay. Why do Courtney and Julie have girls' names, and why doesn't Julie have a dick?
Very good questions. I don't know. That was just kind of the idea. It was like these guys who were kind of they're kind of like mine and Franco's bitches, and they would just have these girls' names. And as far as Julie not having dick, honestly, I think it was just one of those weird things where, like, if a man doesn't have a penis, he probably shouldn't be trusted. It just felt like it was a weird thing.
Superb answer. I think you agree with that question. Anybody? This man in the front. Brilliant.
Yeah. All I wanted to know was how much of the transformation of the guy's character in that film, is any of that from your real life, or does that reflect on anything you've experienced?
A lot of people don't know that I'm a prince. No, I don't even have a brother, so this isn't, not much of this is pulled from my own life. It was really just kind of pulled from the type of movies we dug when we were kids, and that was like the main point of reference. But I'm always up for stopping a rape, so that's kind of my own life.
Fantastic. Anybody else maybe from towards the back, because they tend to get neglected at these events? Is this why? Because the people with no questions sit at the back. Okay, this lady here.
Eastbound and Down is similar humour. Like it kind of crosses the line, but not quite. How did you find that going into the movie? And also, your trophy that finance a sequel?
Yeah, well, as far as the trophy goes, David gave that to me as my rap gift. It was very kind of him. And my wife wouldn't let me bring it into the house, so it's lived in my trunk for a very long time. And I was recently at a hotel where I'd forgotten that that souvenir was in my trunk. And the valet had come over to help me get my bags out of the trunk. I opened it up, and there was just this severed penis back there. And it was just too complicated to explain to him what it was. So I just like shook my head at him and closed the door. I was like, "Don't you scratch this car." And as far as the tone, I mean, we set this movie up kind of around the same time we were dealing with that. We were kind of getting Eastbound and Down going, and you know, one thing that we were really inspired by with Eastbound and Down, and to a way this, it's you know, in a lot of British television with shows like The Office or even like Fawlty Towers or Alan Partridge, you know, there's these characters that aren't completely likable. You know, they're kind of clueless to the world around them, and but you still kind of end up rooting for them or sympathizing for them. And in America, in the studio system there, that's like something that's not explored. Like the studio execs there are always like wondering how likable characters have to be. That's like the main thing you always get notes on for a protagonist, like that the protagonist has to be likable. He has to have all these like, always make like the morally right decisions. And to us, that just felt very limiting for a story. It was something that we just were, you know, we didn't really kind of subscribe to that train of thought. And so I kind of feel like when we set this up in Eastbound, this was kind of us just trying to rail against that train of thought, that you could, you know, rally an audience behind somebody who's a total asshole and make them still kind of weirdly identify with them. And that's kind of what we were just trying to explore.
I mean, what you mentioned there about the studio execs getting involved, people who probably have never written a joke in their life. How difficult is it to deal with notes from them when, if it's my understanding is correct, the notes are sometimes completely stupid?
They're terrible. It's the worst part about writing. But, you know, when I first started writing, you would get in there and these people would give you these terrible notes, and you would spend all this time like arguing with them and telling them why it wasn't funny. And then what I realized is all you really have to do is just pretend like you like it, and then just don't do anything that they're saying. You just film whatever you want.
So that's where the acting skills come in. Just,
Yeah,
nodding and looking interested.
Yeah.
This gentleman here at the front.
Hey, Dion, I was just wondering, speaking a lot of it, are you planning to return to Eastbound and Down? Will it be in season 3?
Yeah, you know, we just started writing the 3rd season just a few weeks ago, and we're going to shoot this summer. So I think it'll come out in the States at the beginning of next year, which should probably be, what, like 15 years here? Maybe? I don't know.
Is there a guy in the white there at the back?
Yeah, I was just wondering, like, it's obviously with you and Natalie and James, you know, the main stars of the film are American, and obviously the director as well. So, like, how did you guys, the sense of humor that you brought with it, how did you work with an Irish kind of cast and crew?
We got, you know, I've shot a lot of things on location, and I gotta say, like, when we came to Belfast, it was like one of the best experiences I've had on a movie. The crew was awesome, they were great, and the people were really incredible, and we just had a good time. You know, I've known David for a long time, and Tim Orr, who's the cinematographer, we also went to film school with him, and the guy was like mixing sound we went to film school with. So you kind of have this circle of buddies who've been running around since the 90s, since they were like 18 years old, with video cameras, just like making these dumb student films. And now we're like in another country, like with like real movie stars like Natalie and James, like making a movie for a studio. And so it was, we kind of just kept this really loose kind of atmosphere. And honestly, it sometimes just felt just as casual as making those like early student films. And I think that is like an attitude that is kind of hard to not surrender to. And I think guys like Charles Dance and Toby Jones and Damian Lewis, these guys just all sort of fell into it. It was kind of hard to be a stick in the mud when everyone's just basically fucking off all day long.
So I think the answer you were looking there for was it was incredibly hard to deal with Irish people. Irish people are dicks. But the gentleman just there next to him with the long head.
Because Natalie and James are sort of Academy favorites, are you hoping for Oscar glory yourself?
Yes, well, you know, this is the movie that both of those guys did right before they went off and gave better performances in 127 Hours with Black Swan. And you know, James in 127 Hours acts with a boulder for the whole entire movie. So I like to think that I prepared him for that.
And Natalie probably got in shape for Black Swan for this scene, which is by far one of the highlights of the movie, I think.
It will be the main reason why people probably see the movie.
Okay.